Well, thank you so much for coming along today. It's definitely a very good turnout. I'm Tasha, Connect's dietitian, and we've got Ben coming on in as well, our physio, if we haven't met Ben, on our talk about healthy ageing. So hopefully I'll only talk for 15 to 20 minutes and let you go on with your day. But just to start off with is that, today's purpose is to provide some general advice about healthy ageing. And, I guess if you've got a specific medical condition or certain requirements or specific goals, it's always good to talk to your GP or, of course, a dietitian, plug. But just, considering, talking to a professional about any specific changes you might be making if, something does resonate with you. But I think there's definitely some general tips that everyone can take away. But I guess putting on my dietitian sort of clinical hat on and just being careful if you do change anything to maybe talk to your GP first. So today we're going to focus on a couple of specific things. So as we get older, looking at our muscles and our bones. And then I guess what a good diet or lifestyle might be looking as we get older, and then we've got some quick FAQs. And I guess again, age is just a number, but things do change as we get older, so it might be something relevant for now or something helpful for you to take away to think about how to best support as you age. So first of all, we're going to focus on muscles. Has anyone heard of something called sarcopenia before? I guess it's got a few different definitions, but it's defined as age-related muscle loss. So every year we lose about 1% of our muscle mass as we age. So we reach our peak muscle mass at around 30 to 40 years of age, and from there we're naturally, as the things change in the body, the aging process starts, and we start to be more prone to losing muscle and more difficult to gain muscle. I guess that 1% doesn't seem like too much of a big deal, but if we think about we're not using our muscles as much, we might be more sedentary than active, we're going to be losing a larger percentage than just that one. But again, if we're active or moving around, if we're using the stairs at work, those sorts of things, that's going to help reduce the rate of that muscle loss. And just an interesting figure there that's used a lot in the literature is that by the time we're in our 80s, we could have lost as much as half of our muscle mass that we've built up as we were younger. So, I think it really is an important thing. And why is that relevant? I guess this sort of figure sort of sums it up quite nicely that, we lose our strength and function and in turn it affects, what we can do day to day. Things might be harder, we might not be able to do stuff as easily as we once could. And from, I guess I work clinically in a hospital as well, and we see that people that have less muscle mass generally don't bounce back from illness quite as well as those that come from more of an active baseline. So, some lifestyle strategies here that encompass, I think, a lot of what Connect Healthcare sort of inspiring better health from, an exercise and a diet perspective can be really helpful in the healthy aging process. And I guess just seeing it in practice, we've got a young, healthy thigh muscle, lots of nice muscle strength, which is reflected by sort of this, and then we've got the thigh bone in the middle, which is in comparison to someone who has had that muscle loss. We don't have as much, and there's more sort of fat mass around it. So the natural makeup of, your tissues is that there's more fat and less muscle. But, it is something that just naturally happens, but we can slow it. So that's a good takeaway from today, I think. Where does nutrition come in? It comes in with protein. So protein are the building blocks of the muscle. Protein is found in, our meats, eggs, fish, chicken, dairy foods, beans, lentils, tofu, that sort of stuff. And if we're eating enough, it helps us maintain the muscle mass that we have. But especially when we're, start doing some strength and conditioning classes, for example, or we're being active, it helps that recovery and muscle building process. And again, thinking about protein, and you've probably read or heard on TV and that sort of stuff, but protein is metabolically active. The more muscle or muscle is metabolically active, my apologies, but the more muscle mass that we have, the more, I guess, calories we burn at rest. So, you know, keeping up that protein intake and that muscle mass can help with weight management as well. And choosing high quality sources more often over the day is a good strategy to make sure that you are able to use the protein that you're using. So typically we see people generally having, you know, tea and toast for breakfast, maybe lunch is, you know, a sandwich with a bit of salad, and then dinner's your roast dinner or your barbecue where you're getting in your meat. But the best way to support maintaining your muscle mass and keeping that constant fuel of protein to be able to use for keeping your muscles active is by including them over the day. And I've got some examples of protein foods, but interestingly, these include a good amount of leucine, which is an amino acid. So a bit of chemistry is that amino acids make up proteins. So a protein is a makeup of unique different amino acid molecules. And leucine is one in particular that's been shown and continues to be shown in the research that it stimulates muscle protein synthesis or muscle building. So having these types of foods in our diets regularly can help us actually build muscle more efficiently as we get older. So I've covered that sort of little bit, but how that might look is, you know, trying to include eggs or a dairy source at breakfast. Soy milk, if you're someone who doesn't have dairy, soy milk is a really good source in terms of providing, you know, a similar sort of protein amount to dairy milk. Yogurts, you know, including something at lunch and dinner that's got sort of, you know, a protein source, and some interesting sort of snacks there if you're a snacker. And especially snacks can be helpful if you're needing to, you know, working to maintain your weight or gain a little bit of weight too. So how's everyone going with that so far? Have we learnt something new? Yeah, okay, cool. So we're going to move on to bone health. And I guess that's another interesting thing. Has anyone heard of osteoporosis? Yeah. So I guess, you know, naturally as we're younger, we're growing and we're building bone and our skeleton and all of that sort of stuff. And that bone building is a really tightly regulated process of making sure that we're, you know, building up that bone, because our bones are in a constant state of turnover. We're breaking it down, but we're also building it up. As we get older, we don't get as good at tightly regulating that, and we're more prone to losing more rather than we're building. And that's, you know, there's some real similarities with what I've talked about with your muscles, is that, you know, by the time you're about 20, 25, you've reached your peak bone building capacity. What you've got is what you've got. So I guess very important for the kids and grandkids to be pestered to have their milk in the morning and be active. But by we reach the 4th decade of life is where we see more breakdown than bone forming. And then unfortunately for the girls, we lose our estrogen, and with that we're losing bone a bit quicker, but you men catch up with increasing age. You know, that sort of process starts to happen a bit quicker as well.
What age do we catch up?
Probably more more into the sort of, over 65, 70 group is where you'd definitely be being conscious of the rate that you're losing. But I guess, again, it's about building that good formation, and then what you can do to maintain your bone density throughout. So I guess in terms of, there are some protective factors, which is avoiding smoking, alcohol only in moderation. Don't worry, you can still have a glass of wine, but not any excess alcohol. Keeping active and spending, you know, time in the sun. You know, the general guidelines are about 15 to 20 minutes each day. Your forearms are a great spot to get sun exposure to absorb and use vitamin D, and having a good diet quality. And I guess I've got osteoporosis and osteopenia up here. Osteopenia, sort of, we go through having, you know, a normal bone density. Osteopenia is the weakening of the bone, so we've lost a little bit, but we're not too concerned, but we want to watch it. And then we have osteoporosis, where our bones are weaker than we'd like them to be, which in turn increases risk of fractures, prone to that, whereas you might have a fall and result in a hip fracture, or you might whack your arm in the door and it might break when usually someone else wouldn't cause a break. So the best goal is to avoid getting a diagnosis of osteoporosis, and I think again relates to what I see in hospital as well as clients in here, is that a lot of people will say to me, I wish I knew more about it before this happened, and I don't think there's a real pathway of people getting screened regularly, but it is something that you can definitely talk to your GP about, because there are ways that you can go and get a scan. So it's called a bone mineral density scan. You lie down, it scans everything, and you get a score of where your bone density is sitting at, and that can be monitored. So if it is something of interest to you to see where you're at, I'd recommend talking to your GP. If you get no success there, we can also refer you on to a partnership that we've got with a business as well. And that's quick.
Is there an age when that's kind of recommended?
Again, I would probably be looking at around 60 years of age, but again, it is something that's accessible. I think around $100 you can get it for, and other ones can get under Medicare. So
Next Thursday.
cool,
Yeah.
very cool.
Down at the upper.
Yeah, perfect.
So then when you know early, what does that mean? You're going to tell us what that means then, is it?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So, yes, that's the next best thing. So again, and as I explained, it's good to make sure that you're encouraging the younger generations that you're in contact with to prioritise being active and getting in an adequate calcium intake so that they do build those strong bones. So, what to do? First of all, I'd recommend talking to our exercise physiologists because, again, if we're seeing that we're showing signs of bone loss or do have osteoporosis, physical activity, especially things like jumping and, those sorts of things, actually stimulate that force on the bone, stimulates our bones to upregulate how much bone sort of building that they're doing, or that remodelling process. So that's a really important takeaway, I think. Following generally a healthy diet pattern, so we'll go through that a little bit later. Sources of calcium and bone healthy nutrients. So I guess that's a lovely sort of summary of them. Keeping your protein up, you're being active. Your leafy greens, vegetables, nuts and seeds are really important sources of micronutrients. So for example, some of the key ones for bone health would be vitamin K, magnesium, manganese, iron. Like there's a whole bunch, but generally if you're getting in your leafy greens, some nuts and seeds regularly, they're going to be just giving you that extra boost of bone health. And in terms of calcium, what foods are in calcium? Dairy, cheese, yogurt, bony fish like sardines, mackerel. Don't know if some people think, oh yes, sardines on toast for lunch, and other people think, oh no thank you, but they are a good source. Tinned red salmon as well. There's a really interesting new product by John West. They've got tuna tins with added calcium in them, and I still haven't gotten around to trying it myself, but I've heard some good feedback. You can get them in flavours. Yeah, it's like they put ground bone powder in it, which is really interesting, but it gets you 1,000 milligrams of calcium, which generally would be fantastic to be getting in every day. So it is an interesting product to look out for if you are wanting to increase your calcium intake.
Salmon with the bone in it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the bones are where you're going to get that calcium from. Yeah, which is very interesting. From a sort of vegetarian, vegan perspective, almonds and tahini and white beans, chickpeas are also good sources of calcium. Unfortunately, we're not as good as absorbing the calcium from those plant sources, but it is really handy. And if you're, again, sort of a couple of times I've mentioned sort of, soy milk or rice milk or oat milk, all of that sort of stuff. If you're using that, look out for on the nutrition label to see if there's calcium added in there, because that's going to be, making sure you're picking a brand that's got calcium in there, so you're equivalent.
Can I ask questions?
Yeah, sure.
Or not? We'll leave it at the end.
No, go for it.
So with like calcium in almonds, we know that's there, and you need to get a lot of almonds to eat calcium. But you
Correct.
mentioned not absorbing. Is it when you eat it with something else, does it absorb? A bit like the lecithins and all this stuff with other things?
Yeah.
Is there anything that helps you absorb calcium out of almonds?
Look, I don't think astoundingly, unfortunately, but it's, I guess for comparison, what you'd get in 250 mils of milk, you'd be needing to eat 3/4 a cup of almonds for the same amount of calcium. Yeah. Nice cheese platter. Hate cheese. No. Yeah. So I guess if you were following dairy free, I'd be recommending more so to get out of your fortified plant milks or things like that rather than your almonds. But again, a handful of almonds here and there as a regular snack, does top up, and hopefully we get the most out of them that we can. But that's a really good question.
Touch just on things like milk.
Yeah.
Any differences between full cream, skim, A2?
Not so much in terms of calcium. Yeah. So whatever works for you. And then I should have probably put that on my FAQ slide. But on milk and dairy, I think there's been a lot of talk about whether full cream dairy or skim dairy, all of that sort of stuff is best. And what the data shows now is that, I guess full cream has saturated fats in it. It can be a concern for some people, but I think recently what's come out is that, when full cream milk's consumed as part of, a healthy diet pattern and, I guess calorie controlled for weight maintenance, doesn't actually show any harmful effects. So if full cream's the way you want to go, there's sort of really no harm in it compared to
Another question,
yeah.
homogenised versus non-homogenised?
Whatever you prefer.
Like I just heard about the fat bit. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
With like if you're looking at an alternative,
Yeah.
what would be the one to go for?
I'd-
So if you don't want to have cow's milk, what
Yeah.
would you go for?
Yeah. The one I'd go for probably first would be soy milk because it's got a similar sort of amount of protein to dairy milk. And then, the other ones are a lot lower in protein. They're sort of water plus a little bit of, of those things. But, it comes down to whatever preference you have, how you're having it. If you're not a soy person, whatever, just make sure that you've got your calcium added to it there. Yeah, almond milk. Yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. You're probably going to be getting about 2 grams of protein compared to 7 or 8 in milk and soy. So from that perspective, it's not quite as highly ranked for me, but there's nothing wrong with it, especially if you are including protein over the day. But that's a good question too. Thanks,
Of
Tom.
course, the other loaded question, 1 or 2 shots of coffee with the milk doesn't particularly impact on it?
Very good question. Excess caffeine intake can, compete and block the absorption of calcium. When it's, maybe 1 cup of coffee and then, you're having a few sources over the day, it's nothing to, completely worry about. But I guess with my knowledge of this, I've been trying harder to either have my coffee 20 minutes before or after I have breakfast if I'm having, cereal or yogurt or something, so I can make the most of absorbing that calcium from there. So again, that's another, thing of maybe spacing it out as well to maximise the absorption of other sources of calcium.
So with the coffee, basically you're saying it would more or less negate itself?
More or less. You'll still absorb some, but just not as much. So say you're getting 300 milligrams of calcium from, 1 cup of milk. So, but you might be, you'll maybe get a third of that, or, I'm not sure exactly, but you're not going to get it as much. Yeah. But yes, definitely still have your morning cup of coffee. But if you're looking up to 6, 7, 8 cups of coffee every day, and it was close to your meals, would probably be being wary of that. Cool. Oh, thank you for the discussion and the questions. So going on to what is a healthy diet pattern? What should I be eating? There's no specific diet pattern or prescription from me for all of you. I think often if we've got the morning show on in the morning, there's always something about nutrition and what the next fad diet is and all of that. But I think generally regular meal pattern, including all of the food groups, getting in enough protein, also focusing on, you know, your calcium as well, and however that looks for you, whether it's breakfast, lunch and dinner, lunch, snack, dinner, you know, whatever meal pattern it is for you, just getting in enough, having good quality sleep, managing stress, avoiding smoking, and having alcohol and caffeine in moderation are sort of your basics that create a really, you know, healthy diet pattern without saying restrict this, don't have that, all of that sort of stuff. You know, you can enjoy your wine, you can enjoy your almonds and wine, or, you know, chocolate and things, but I guess just generally everything in moderation and including things from all of the food groups. Now I've included this sort of picture on the side reflecting sort of more of a Mediterranean diet pattern, because that's, you know, something that we all know is a very good style of eating. I guess focusing on your fruits and vegetables, unsaturated fats, so your olive oil and nuts and seeds and things like that. Good omega-3 or fish intake, and beans and lentils and stuff. You know, I guess just generally, where can you think in your diet, maybe I can add in a little bit of more vegetable with that meal, or if I'm having this for lunch, maybe I can add that in to make it a little bit more, you know, wholesome or rounded out, to include an extra bit of colour or food group. It's going to do you well, rather than focusing on, oh, I shouldn't be having that or this or that. More thinking about what can I add in to make this look a little bit nicer, a little bit better.
Excuse me, what's your view? I've got a thing of protein powder in my cupboard.
Yeah.
I've had it for a few years. I made protein balls once. And I'm sure it's out of date.
Yeah, I was going to check the use bar.
What is your view of protein powder that people seem to use?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Not everyone needs to have it, and it doesn't. Yeah, it's not a, you know, something that everyone needs to try and include in their diet, but it can definitely be a really useful thing if you're someone who doesn't eat meat very often, doesn't, you know, have, maybe you're more of a breakfast skipper, but with this you're thinking, oh, maybe I need to make a little bit of a change, or try and include something more. You know, those sorts of things can be helpful to get in, you know, a bit of extra protein whilst not having to sit down to a steak at lunch and dinner or anything like that. So yeah, it definitely can be helpful, and especially, you know, a thing that we see with aging as well is that our appetites might naturally go down once we, you know, I think generally over your 30s, 40s to 60s, you're probably more prone to gaining weight, and then from there we're probably more prone to losing weight gradually, and things like making a nourishing drink, whether it's, you know, sustagen or protein powder or Milo with some milk, can be a really helpful way to just supplement and help maintain that weight whilst getting in a really good amount of nutrients. So yeah,
that's good.
Cool, that's all right. So you've helped me segue nicely to the next slide. So I guess just touching on weight, you know, generally through the middle of our lives, we're more prone to putting on weight. We have, you know, changes in how much or where we store our fat. Often we have kids, and what may have been a gym class is now spent with the kids or grandkids. We're dealing with work, kids, keeping the house tidy, all of that sort of stuff. So our lifestyle naturally changes, and, you know, there's lots of different things that might come into that sort of weight gain, and there's never a need or pressure. You know, I'm not coming in and saying everyone needs to lose weight or gain weight or anything, but if you think it is something that maybe you should or want to do, you know, as little as losing 5% of your total body weight can show significant health benefits and reductions in, you know, risk of chronic diseases like diabetes or heart disease or things like that. So it's not like you have to do a Biggest Loser and try and drop everything as soon as you can, but it's just incorporating some, you know, lifestyle changes and that might help with that. But again, you know, waist circumference is a good indicator for, you know, reflecting our risk of the development of chronic diseases. But in general, your GP is probably going to say, oh, your BMI is here, and maybe you want to get it down. But, you know, generally weight and BMI is not the best indicator of overall health. It can give us, you know, a gauge, but there are flaws in it. But regardless of what your weight is, undertaking healthy lifestyle and diet strategies, regardless of whether the scale goes up or down, is going to be really supportive of good health. So,
if you're really old, like if you get to your 90s or
yeah.
90s, if you're still keeping your body weight, that's a good thing?
Fantastic. Yeah.
So it's more likely to lose weight if in those years.
Yeah. And what we want to focus on, which is what I do day in and day out at my other work at Flinders, is finding strategies to help older people maintain their weight, help them supplement their diet, for example, with protein drinks or
supplements. So is that the muscle loss that's leading to that decrease in weight?
Generally, it will be muscle, it can be fat, it can be a combination of everything. I guess especially in a clinical sort of setting, they're pretty unwell and they're sitting there and they don't want to eat. But yeah, generally it would be muscle, but also then as, your appetite decreases, maybe, things, you're a bit lonely or things, you're not eating as much and you're prone to losing weight. And it's often easier to lose weight in a quicker time frame in that age group than maybe we'd find ourselves. So yeah, weight maintenance once we do head into that more older age is a great sign that things are going pretty well. And I guess the point is at any age, if you're noticing that you are losing weight a bit quicker than maybe you'd think, or it is always good to go and have a chat with your GP if you do notice that you're dropping weight a bit faster than maybe you would, because it's good to get screened for a few different conditions if you're finding that. So another little side note. So I guess that's just your general, waist circumference that I think I don't know if the exercise physiologists use that, do that in their screening. I don't sort of do too many anthropometric measurements in my clinic time, but I think it is relevant to generally looking at your chronic health, chronic disease risks and all of that sort of stuff.
Sorry, is that waist?
Waist circumference, yeah. And that's easily found on the government, so if you sort of do that, you can get that up on the government website.
With those numbers as well, like, although there are kind of cut-offs for what is increased risk, decreasing it by even, so say you're above those risk levels, even just by decreasing it by 1 centimetre or 2, it's not a certain level that is increased risk. It is a continuum, and so even small improvements will have a great improvement on your overall risk. So
yeah. Excellently said. So we're nearly at the end, so you can all go and get coffee number 2. But I've got some, some general questions that people often sort of scratch their head and say, is this true? Or I find this or whatever. The first one is, can protein make you constipated? Not generally. I think sometimes people may try and increase their protein intake or try and increase their meat or have a shake, and then that in turn means they're not having the toast that they were having, or they're having more meat and less vegetables. That's fibre getting sort of crowded out of your diet and, generally a result. But there's no real, clinical information that can, any molecules in protein that would make you constipated. So if you're looking to increase it, try and make sure that you are still getting in fibre through whole grains, fruits, vegetables and beans and things like that. I'll stop talking about constipation in a second. Another big one is, a lot of people might say, I feel like dairy makes me constipated. In older life, it's a bit more anecdotal, but it is something that comes up generally. High milk diets, again, similarly to protein, if you're not getting in adequate fibre, that's probably something to look out before reducing how much dairy you're having. But there is, a little bit, it's not uncommon for children to have dairy sensitivities or allergies, and sometimes that can carry on into older age. But just, have a bit of a play around. Are you having enough fibre? Those sorts of questions before you get into blaming dairy, because dairy gets a bad rap sometimes. It's a bit sad. Does fat make you fat? No. I guess when we're thinking about how much we're eating overall in a day and whether that's coming from a beautiful balance of carbohydrates and fats and protein, or mainly carbs or mainly fats with our protein in there, because everyone's going to eat enough protein, it's not going to make a big difference. And there's been some really good studies in the last few years looking at people trying to lose weight or incorporate a healthy eating pattern, whether it's low carbohydrate, high fat or high carb, low fat. Have I said that right? And I guess at the end, when they're generally incorporating healthy eating strategies along with that, there's no real difference of which one provides weight loss or weight maintenance. So it's just, you've got to find what works for you and what you feel healthy and well fueled on.
But Tash, there's a significant difference between good fats and bad fats, right?
Yeah,
so trans fats, saturated fats, we should avoid.
Yes,
We don't
good
need
point.
at all in the diet, right?
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
at all.
No, they're not necessary. A little bit of saturated fat is good for us, but that's generally what we'd get from if we were having, animal products at some stage. But it is important for some steroid hormones that we make and that, but generally focusing on more of a balance of unsaturated fats from, your plant-based sources and olive oils and things rather than, using lard and things that we used to be more of a default back in the day. And yeah, absolutely, even though hot chips are really yummy, they're not necessary to get in good nutrients. So yeah, that's correct.
So if you put hot chips in, say, olive oil, they would be unsaturated,
Yeah.
wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would be.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I guess they're still, yeah.
High calorific,
Yeah.
but
Using it more in a plant-based oil. Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although doesn't changing olive oil change the properties?
Mm. Yeah.
Well, does it doesn't turn it into a trans fat.
I wouldn't put it in olive oil.
No. But I guess the concept of focusing more on olive oil and maybe roast potatoes with a drizzle of olive oil to help them roast rather than but no, it's a good point that more so. Oh yes, air fryer. They've made a very good sort of appearance, crispy without any fat. Yeah, very good point. I saw them on special in the paper today, so. And then the last point is often, should I be taking supplements? There's no one supplement that will combat the aging process. There are some that may be relevant to your health, such as a calcium supplement or other sort of nutrient supplements. You might need to be taking B12. There's a lot of other things that may be clinically indicated when you're getting your general blood tests with your GP and having a look at what your health priorities are. But in general, there's not really one thing that I'd recommend everyone take for healthy aging. And there is there's a lot of antioxidant sort of supplements. I'm not an expert in that area, but what we do know is there actually may be more harm in them than benefit in taking some specific antioxidant supplements sort of every day. But again, it's about talking to your GP about it and always mentioning if you are taking something new, seeing what your GP thinks of that.
Is there any advantage in taking a calcium supplement from a certain age?
Potentially. Again, good to have a bit of a dietary assessment in how much you're taking and talking to a doctor about it, because there can be other medications that might help, or I guess from an osteoporosis perspective, there are treatment options that may be used in complement with supplementing calcium, or ones that you don't need to, so they slow the rate of bone loss once you've got that diagnosis. But again, if it is you can't maintain enough calcium intake through your diet, it can be easy, but again, really good to talk to your doctor about it first.
You need the D to uptake, don't you? The vitamin D to uptake the calcium?
Yes, very good.
I mean,
So
I had to have it over different
Yeah.
places and I needed to build up my bones, and
yeah.
we fell for later on yogurt and Caltrate.
Yeah.
God knows, but it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Fantastic.
So,
Yeah. That's
and
wonderful.
Stuck with it.
Fantastic. Yeah. So it is. Yeah. That's great to hear, because
Yeah, but this particular cupboard's got it's got I think it's got even magnesium.
Yeah.
In it, but
Yeah, no, it can definitely be helpful for sure, and it is good, but I would recommend just chatting to someone about it before you go and buy it off the shelf, because they might have a specific recommendation for you of the best amount or brand, or whether you need just the calcium or calcium and vitamin D, or all that sort of stuff. So yeah, but that's great. I think you're all free to go, really, unless we want to have a bit more of a chat.
With some of those supplements, I mean, can you end up having too much in your diet?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's all right. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you very much.
Hope it was useful. Cool. Hopefully everyone learnt something new.